Suhonos. He is a candidate of technical sciences, professor of the Russian Academy of Natural Sciences, cosmologist, author of a number of excellent books, Large-Scale Harmony of the Universe, and so he has developed a model of the matrix of happiness, which he is presenting to us today, and we will have the opportunity to ask him questions and discuss with you. Therefore, questions are only welcome, yes, after the report.
Absolutely.
And I give the floor to Sergey Ivanovich. Now the presentation itself will be presented to you, and then we will deploy it to our audience, where the participants have already gathered, and the discussion will turn out to be so interactive. That's it, Sergey Ivanovich. I give you the floor.
So, good afternoon, dear listeners and viewers. As a matter of fact, I volunteered myself today, asked Anna why. Because there is such an audience in which I will be very pleased to present a new topic. It is completely new, fresh. I am not sure about it, so I will first go to my first work, which I will present again. This is the third edition of the book Large-Scale Harmony of the Universe, which Andrei Kensbergsky and I have prepared for publication in a modern version. And as soon as it was published on the Trenet website, RU immediately drew attention to it in the Czech Republic and Slovakia. I have signed a contract to publish this book in Czech Slovak. For the first time in my life, my main work will be translated into foreign languages. 2,500 copies to begin with. I have to say that to me.
Asks, and speak louder.
And into the microphone. Yes, let's have the microphone, because there will be a recording going on normally, right? But I can scream, of course. But I don't think it's going to be good. Of course, of course. You see, they didn't equip me with a microphone.
Yeah.
Yes, right here, not lower. That's it, that's it. Yes, that's it. And now you can hear it well, right? Great. Yes. So, the book, which is the main book, which outlines a new cosmological model of the universe scale hierarchical. This is the third edition. The first was in the 2000th year, then in the 2000th year. Second, it's 2000 now. Well, literally again, 20 years later. This book was translated for the first time, and I am glad that it was translated into Slavic languages and not into some kind of seedy English. A joke. But this suggests that I'm not advertising it. It suggests that interest in this book has seeped through such, I would say, layers of disinformation. And by some miracle, she came to the attention of a Czech publishing house. I am very happy about this. Here. Now about, as a matter of fact, the presentation that will be held now and the reports that will be. This is a topic that has grown out of this book. It was even somehow indicated here in the form of a small paragraph. This is an idea that flashed through the process of writing this book. I put it aside until I was asked to tell something about people and not about the universe. I told you something. The first time it was successful. The second time I was hit with a barrage of criticism. I realized that this criticism was fair, that I had not finalized this idea. Now I am putting this idea, having slightly refined it, for the first discussion. Since I am an absolute amateur in the field of sociopsychology, I do not know any predecessors. You see, I, like this snowman who came out of the forest in this area, do not know anything at all, what was done before me, who said what. Then I risk, of course, to expose myself and tell everyone about the device of the bicycle. But on the other hand, what to do? I think we still need to take a risk, because there are some elements here that, I think, are missing from other authors. Because there are still some ideas about the hierarchy of social structures. That these social structures are living organisms, just like you and me, only by a third, from the third large-scale floor. That is, there is already an element, there is some introduced by me. Well, plus my favorite activity. My favorite activity is the systematization of well-known facts. As a result of such a fun start, we are going to go into a very simple presentation, which will be... Anna, you got me? Which will start with primitive things, will end with more complex ones. To begin with, we always evaluate our condition one way or another. Yes, but first. Now Anna will switch. First, the final result, which you and I need to get closer to. Oh yeah. Here I would like to introduce you to the matrix of happiness, which consists of 8 by 8, so to speak, and cells backwards. No, don't be in such a hurry. This is so, you can finish the china in 3 minutes. What?
Now we will return to.
Yeah. What am I doing wrong, Igor? You're doing the right thing. I'm suggesting it. Oh, I see. So, as a matter of fact, this is the final result. The matrix of happiness is 8 by 8. That is, I may have deliberately adjusted 64 hexagrams somewhere under the chessboard. And under the book of changes, under the hexagrams. Why? Because, well, I really wanted to join these great, so to speak, systems. Well, I think we'll see later. Maybe we won't have 8 by 8, 8 by 6. Maybe it will be 10 by 5. That's not the point. The point is not in the number of lines and divisions, but the point is in the principles. And now we're starting with the simplest, and yes, the simplest. How do we assess our condition? We can evaluate it as positive, as neutral, or as negative. If we are people who are developing people, creators, then we will evaluate positively, as the development of creation. Peace as stable peace, and negatively as degradation and destruction. This division is inherent only for creators. The next one is it. Here, as a result, we have, as it were, some simple scheme like this, which, if we distinguish 8 levels of our being here, for example, our health, our quality of consumption, what we consume, what feelings we experience, what we see, beautiful, ugly, tasty, tasteless we eat, our body, what is it like, weak, dystrophic, or are we athletes? Further, our career is successful, unsuccessful. What we do is our business. Then our intellectual development, creativity, and spiritual. There are 8 levels in total. This is a biological level, it is social, it is spiritual and informational. In total, we have only 8 levels. It's a personal dimension, right? But it means that we can evaluate all these levels both positively, both neutrally and negatively. In other words, we can say to ourselves, everything is absolutely bad for us at all levels, absolutely everything is bad. Or vice versa, everything is absolutely fine with us, or so-so, normal. Here. And in the future, I will use without these 3 divisions into, therefore, biological, social, and spiritual. Well, in order to simplify and remove unnecessary colors, you just need to remember this. The next slide. Here. But the fact is that we can, of course, evaluate everything positively, everything negatively, but most people do not do this. Why? Because many people evaluate their, let's say, intellectual development positively. Things are bad, health is not important. And as a result of these assessments of our 8 levels, we have variations. These variations are 3 to the 8th power. 3 because there are 3 states, and 8 because we have 8 cells. To the 3/8 degree, we can have potentially 6,561 states of our personal feeling. That's a lot of variety. Here, the mathematician present here will not let me lie. We checked it with him. The figure is really like this. Here. But in fact, it only says that we are primitively assessing our condition. There can be 50 shades of gray in these shades of gray. Do you understand? If we start taking into account 50 shades of gray, another 50 shades of development, and 50 shades of degradation, then this figure will turn into infinity. I see, right? Because here we have 3 to the power of 150, which takes us to some kind of universal infinity. This is the way it really is, because people, of course, do not always evaluate themselves unambiguously. But for simplicity, in order to understand the scheme, we will simplify it to the limit, so. Then the next slide. And yes, back. Now look, there are people who concentrate on one level, only on one level. These are very rare people, but they are very strongly imprinted in the public consciousness. Well, for example, Saint Basil, to whom the cathedral was erected, a man who was engaged only in spiritual development. He has everything else. Well, it's clear how he went around in rags, that he ate some leftovers, to say that he, so to speak, did not count books, that he did not do anything. He was only engaged in spiritual improvement. Here is such an individual. I see, right. Here his matrix is so linear. We take another person, the well-known Wasserman. I do not know how he prays there, goes to church, is engaged in creativity. In fact, here Andrei did not move the yellow square of the court. In fact, the yellow square should be right here. This is a person who is engaged in intellectual development, who knows everything about everything. I see, right. Well, in my opinion, he doesn't do physical education. In my opinion, so to speak, he doesn't care what he eats. It seems so to me. This is a conditional Wasserman, by no means a real one. It's an image. Or let's take some kind of a jock. What does he do? By the way, I know such jocks, people who are engaged only in sports and are not interested in anything else in life. Absolutely nothing interests them, only sports. Here you are. Well, you can come up with others, so to speak, people who are engaged only in, let's say, consumption, such as, gargantua, who eat all the time. Or they are engaged in health, who run around clinics all the time. Everything else is absolutely indifferent to them. There are quite a lot of such monopersonalities, in fact, both in history and in culture. It's like we're just giving a blueprint for what can be depicted like this. The next slide. And now we will consider the second dimension of this matrix. The second dimension is social, the individual. That is, I am, for example, coming before you as a person. Then my family, then my team, where I work, where I earn money. Next is the city I live in. Then it's a republic, a state. Well, here we live, let's say, as if in the Russian Federation. But there is also the Chechen Republic. There is Tatarstan, for example. There is Yakutia. In other words, each republic has its own specifics. And life in these republics differs significantly, I think, in some way from the general background. Therefore, it is necessary to allocate this level. Then the country in which we live in Russia. Then civilization. Well, I want to say that many people do not know what civilization is. I'll just tell you that Western European civilization unites countries such as the USA, Australia, New Zealand, and the whole of Europe. If I am a Frenchman, I live in France, then in France, let's say, everything is fine, but in civilization it can be bad. Or vice versa, there are strikes in Greece, and Western European civilization is doing fine. Therefore, let's highlight this level. Well, humanity, all of our humanity together. The next slide. Yes, here. What is it? Yes, here, by the way, is the perfect picture, when everything is fine. You see, this is a complete idiotic matrix, so to speak, in which only idiots can be all right, you know. Everything is fine. Grace is everywhere. Well, I don't know. The next slide. And here's the real picture. It's like this. That is, it may be good, let's say, with the health of all our levels, but somewhere it may be good, somewhere it may be so-so. Somewhere it is bad, that is, here is such a variety. This is a conditional variety. I didn't mean any specifics here. It's just randomly scattered squares. I see, right? But it's already clear why. Because if we took 3/8 degrees there, then 3 in the 64th is 10/30th. 10/30th is a number that has no name. I can say that there are about as many atoms of the sun. Well, this is once again taking into account shades, 50 shades of gray, orange, and everything else. In other words, the whole matrix, in principle, takes us even beyond the limits of the galaxy, beyond the universe in its diversity. Therefore, life is diverse. The next slide. Aina, don't get distracted. So, we have finally reached the formula of happiness. What is the formula of happiness? This is, of course, the very first iteration. When the sum of the positive squares, relatively speaking, is greater than the sum of the black squares, then we feel happy. I say, this is the first terrace. In fact, it is necessary to make a very serious correction to this formula, and I will deal with it. But the prerequisite must be that the individual's health cell is at least so-so. Why? Because if, let's say, God forbid, or someone has cancer, then this person absolutely does not care what is happening in the world, in civilization, and so on at work. Well, it doesn't matter, he's not interested in it anymore. Therefore, or is he starving, for example, right? But these bases, the base levels, they should always be at least gray, right? And everything else can play as you like. The next slide. So we got here is some yes. Another point that should be very important to note. The fact is that no one really knows what social organisms are. This is just the beginning. Although the foundation was laid back in Plato's time, then he was engaged in this up to Hegel. Many very scientists were seriously engaged. But the organizational theory of states and social organisms, it is practically at the start, at the zero level of development. No one yet knows how to approach this issue seriously. It is clear that, let's say, the state is not just a sum of people. It's really a living organism. It has its own laws of development. The same can be said about the family, about the working collective. Well, how is it possible to distinguish all these levels? If it is not clear what it is at all, well, it is almost impossible. So I think most people simplify. They perceive the city as just a whole, without any division therefrom the spiritual development of the city to its, so to speak, health. Here. Or we can say that in some very poisoned city, where there are a lot of factories, a very high spiritual level, there are many monasteries. Well, then we can say that here it will be fine, yellow, and here everything will be black. Well, I say, for example, yes. In fact, of course, for the most part, no one evaluates this, so this diversity. It is reduced to the evaluation of just each of these levels. Well, let's say I can evaluate it in the city, but it's fine. Or, oh, our city is developing, roads are being built, shops are being built, everything is fine. Country. If I live, let's say in America, Kolsav recently spoke, says, I am proud of America, because it is a beautiful country, although it is our geopolitical enemy. But how everything works here. So I and the Americans are proud. The Russians are not proud of Russia at the moment. In the USSR, they were proud. In other words, there can be positive, negative, neutral ratings, and so on. But if we read that we have 7 levels here, and there are 8 levels here, 7 plus 8, 15, then we can then make up a matrix. It will be here. 3 to the 15th degree. 3 to the 15th power is also a huge number, which I didn't even write because, but anyway, one way or another, each of us is subconsciously, and not consciously, so I'm trying to bring our subconscious to our conscious level. I see, right. Evaluates everything. We want it, we don't want it, we evaluate ourselves, we evaluate our city, we evaluate the country, we evaluate the world. It's bound to happen anyway. In conversations in the kitchen, on the phone, when we watch TV, we spit or we don't spit, or we rejoice. We clap our hands when our athletes win there, it doesn't matter how, one way or another we evaluate it all. Absolutely. And that's why this matrix, it's playing all the time, it's changing. The next slide. So, we are done with the first topic. It was a water theme dedicated to. So, we continue. But the first part was devoted, as it were, to the matrix and its dimensions. The second part is devoted to a rather curious division of people into 3 types. I was very proud when I realized that all people can be divided into 3 personality types. On the creators, on the apophagists, lovers of living one day, and the destroyers. When I called Andriy, I said, listen, he says, that's how he is. Yes, of course, Shiva, so to speak, Cherry and Brahman. Yes, Brahman. Brahman is a higher level for him. I was upset, but then I thought, but thank God. No need to open anything. So we have 3 gods. The God of destruction, the God of life, and the God of creation. In fact, I then began to analyze. I realized that almost all people with one degree or another, again, there are shades of darkness of reliability can be attributed to different categories. The next slide. Well, for example, the creators. Moreover, despite the fact that the creator is a kind of positive, so to speak, group, there is a whole spectrum from a plus. This is a plus to a minus. That's a plus, it's Lomonosov. The average level is a person who just works as a designer. And the lower level is such a villain, a hyperboloid of engineer Garin, who creates all sorts of harmful vaccines, atomic bombs, who creates them not in order to benefit humanity, but in order to get overbearing humanity. Is that clear? These are such evil creators. Genius and villainy are compatible in principle, I believe, from my point of view. So, it's like this hierarchy. In fact, you can draw thousands of levels of varying degrees here. The next slide. It's the same with the keeper. And who are the keepers? Those who sing. There is only a moment between the past and the future. It is called life. Those who say we need to live with today, which I lie in the sun and move my ears. This is just this group of people who enjoy just life. They don't want to be creative, they don't like military destroyers, and so on. This is such a golden mean, which keeps life in almost constant, such a pleasant state, with whom, of course, I must constantly communicate personally, because I consider myself to be in the first category of restless life improvers. That is, if I don't improve the reports, at least one day I didn't improve something, in theory there, at home there. My wife is like that. We redo something there all the time, then our day would have been in vain, and I have a negative mood coming. And there are people who will do nothing, if only it were so, right? In other words, these are completely different categories of personalities, and they need to be understood that they are. Both are necessary and useful. Let's go further. The third category of destroyers. Here too, there is from the very plus to the very minus. Well, plus, these are the defenders of the fatherland, so to speak, of all the oppressed, so to speak, the military, who defend the motherland, so to speak, there. Uncle Stepa, who is there, if necessary, there will get someone there, a policeman, right? Here, just people who like to fight. That's who? Well, there's a fist fight going out there wall to wall, yes, in the villages. Or now we have all these boxers there, hand-to-hand fighting and so on. They like to just fight, but without malice, without everything, but they like to do it. These are the people. And finally, a group of negative destroyers, the demons. These are all kinds of criminals. These are scoundrels of all stripes. These are all sorts of mythological there. By the way, read Mahabharata, Abharata. Mahabharata there. There in the end they win. That is, oddly enough, that is, there is a struggle going on between some relatives there all the time. Then those who won are devoured by these here. A very sad ending is so perfect, and everything is described so well there, yes. When you read this ending, you begin to understand that everything is really going to hell in this world. But in fact, everything ends in destruction. Here, our beautiful solar system, with our beautiful Earth, will be destroyed sooner or later. We all understand this very well. Why? Because the sun will burn out, the hydrogen will run out, the energy will stop radiating. Our sun will turn into a red giant that will swallow up all the orbits of all the planets and the solar system. Even inhabited by Mecca at the level of Mars, it will perish. Therefore, Musk will not save us. I warn you in advance. And Mars won't save us, yes. Therefore, there is nothing to hope for this. We need to do more serious things than dreams, so to speak, of settling on this desert planet, which we absolutely do not need, from my point of view. Here. But it is, by the way. In other words, it is clear that each class has both a plus and a minus. And a minus is a relative minus. It should always be understood that everything that is created material, everything will be destroyed. Buddhists like to do this. I've seen a movie where they build castles out of sand there for several days, if not several weeks. Beautiful, beautiful figures. When they build them, they then erase it all once. Thus, they remind themselves that everything material in this world is temporary. Well, remember death. This is also a famous phrase from this song, right? But anyway, the next slide. You and I will be engaged in my favorite group, the development group. Why do I consider myself to be a group of creators? Such a breed there are creators. People who always want to change something, improve something, come up with something new. I refer myself here, and therefore we will continue to consider this entire matrix only within the framework of this group. Why? I'll explain. Because in order to consider it within the framework of other groups, I need to somehow move there internally and feel this world of other people that I am. Yes, I can say, by the way, that I really like life. When I discovered all this, I began to remember. I remembered that, it turns out, I always picked up my friends in a complementary way. In other words, I have always liked friends who belong to the second category. I definitely need to be friends with some one fighter, such as a security officer. And that calms me down. That is, if there is an enforcer of my friendly, so to speak, squad who is nearby, I think it's okay if something happens. He will stand there with a sword there, go a little bit there, will protect me there, my creative nature, and for example, yes. But they like it on the contrary. Why? Because they lack my creativity, and we are attracted to each other, right? Here. But I like people who lie in the sun, moving their ears there. I also really like it. Because only with them can I really relax. Here. Because I have this creativity. He, of course, drives forward somewhere all the time. I'm exhausted. Therefore, we will deal with this breed, not because it is the best. By the way, I must say that there are a lot of temples built for all three gods in India. Imagine 1.5 billion Hindus. How many temples are there worth? So, half of these temples are dedicated to Vishnu, half are dedicated to Shiva, and either 2 or 3 temples in total are dedicated to us, the creators of Brahma. Can you imagine what, so to speak, what kind of discrimination of creators? Humanity is very ruthless with creators in general. They are burned, their livers are pecked out on bonfires, crucified on crosses, killed with stones. For some reason, people don't like creators, but it's obvious because you still want to live quietly, without changing anything around, and here these restless personalities are always trying to change the world somewhere. Christ came, began to change something, he was crucified. Prometheus brought fire. With what is fire to people? He was pecked. Even this Pythagoras himself was stoned to death in his old age. Archimedes was also killed. This is the story of the creators. Rarely, what kind of bird flies to the middle of the deeper? I'm not talking about these unfortunate poets Pushkin, Lermontov and others, Yesenin, Mayakovsky, right. That is, they have a difficult life, the creators. Therefore, although I am proud of the fact that I relate myself to this breed, I understand perfectly well that I did not have the best share because, well, it fell out, so it fell out, I carry my cross. Here. I apologize to other groups so that they don't take offense at me, why I consider only this breed. I see, right. The next slide is a mystery. So, now we are already looking a little more extended at the same saint, Basil. Relatively speaking, he doesn't care about anything except his spiritual development. That wasn't really the case, of course. Why? Because he was worried. He went there to restore Ivan the Terrible's troops at the time when he was going to Pskov, and stopped. Ivan the Terrible is back, and he did a lot of good things for people. But I'm so conditional, of course, that's all. It is clear that this is a conditional Basil the Blessed. The next slide is a mystery. Here is the same spiritual individual who develops here only. This is a Buddhist or, frankly, the Buddha himself. Well, Buddhists, they generally treat the world as something non-existent. Therefore, they absolutely don't care, sorry for such a musical expression, how this world works, what happens there. By and large, it's all the same. Because all of this is Maya, all of this is not real. The main thing is to focus on your own mind, so that you can then migrate to nirvana. At the same time, of course, they absolutely do not need creativity. They do not create anything. They do not read anything. Well, I don't read serious books. Buddhists don't build anything, as a rule, except for their temples, where you can live there. Careers are not engaged, so to speak. Well, true, they are engaged in the body. Their consumption is poor. Their health is so-so. That is, well, it's conditional. I see, right. The next slide is a mystery. Here you are, the same representative already in this matrix is an intellectual individual. The next slide. Then we have the same example again, already in the matrix. This is a physically developed individual. I repeat again, this is all conditional. The next slide. And here is some mysterious intellectual, creative individual who is engaged in creativity, reads a lot of books, builds something there all the time, creates, and applies uniformly well to the rest of the space of this matrix. The next slide. Now let's move on to some of these, I would say, not very, so to speak, pleasant personalities. Let's say this is what we have here. I do not know this person. I apologize to him in advance for using his photo, because, perhaps, this is a very good person. But this is a conditional official, you know, right? Which, let's say, he takes bribes. Well, for example, I rarely do this with officials, but he takes it, and that's why he's not doing well there in spiritual terms, so to speak. But he's got a good intellect, he's very smart, it's very good with his career and consumption, judging by his tummy, right. In other words, he's doing well here. But at the same time, of course, he eats a lot, drinks a lot, his health may be shaken because of this. He doesn't do physical education, he doesn't go to the gym, so it's not very important for him here either. He treats everything else equally. The next person. Well, this is another example. Here's a drinking actor, for example. Well, as for a particular comrade, I say, this is a conditional Efremov, you know, a conditionally drinking actor. I do not know what he really has on a spiritual level. What kind of sounds are there? I don't know what he has there with this spiritual level, but creatively. I have seen him in a live performance. I have seen his roles in films. He is, of course, a creatively gifted person. What does it say, right? About intelligence. Well, I don't think he read a lot of books. A smart person, of course, yes. Creation. It is unlikely that he built any houses there, planted gardens, grew trees. But as for the body, the consumption of health, he thinks the failure was complete, because, frankly, he ruined himself. His health? Here is this conditional comrade Efremov. That's his matrix. The next slide is a mystery. Now look. Well, recently, for example, here I am, conditionally, such a person who is, as it were, placed here in creativity. The intellect of creation. I perceived myself, my family, the team in which I worked, and the city in which I lived normally. Why? Because, well, our town hasn't degraded like that, at least not with me, right? And as for Russia, as for our country and civilization, I didn't like it, frankly speaking, for example. Because when I went abroad, I liked everything there. I have seen how well everything is developing there. This is the matrix I had, for example, recently, back in the 19th year, and on the next slide. And suddenly we have, so to speak, a covidlo, which covered us with a black basin, copper, so to speak. And everything immediately became bad. It became bad all over the world. It became bad not only in Russia, but it also became bad, let's say, in the team. But in my team, thank God, it's still not bad, but let's say, some creative person who earned before. I lost my job and stayed with my family in such a gray, slightly yellow world, orange. And everything else has become very bad for him, negative. Everything is bad. The world is bad, civilization is bad, the country is bad, the city is bad, and so on. These are, of course, personal assessments, but they show something. The mystery is as follows. Here. In order to somehow protect their psyche, people, of course, some make curtains like this, block up, right? Here, for example, is my hut from the edge. I don't know anything. I closed such a curtain, and here I am living, quietly traveling with myself, creating conversations, sitting in my creative tower. And I don't want to know what is going on around me. Well, from there, the truth can then fly in full because of this curtain. But I sort of temporarily calmed myself down. There's nothing there, as it were. He hid his head in the sand, so he shut himself up in a dark room, as it were, right. My granddaughter closes her eyes and says, I'm not there. She thinks she can't see. No one sees her. The next slide is a mystery. Yes, well, you can, of course, open this curtain a little if, let's say, everything is fine in your family, and everything is fine at work, and now there are, I know a lot of people who are not interested in anything except their life, family, and their work. They don't give a damn about anything else, do they? They don't even want to know anything. He doesn't watch TV, he doesn't watch the news. The next person. Well, that's how we would run through the matrix with you already, yes, according to some options. I say again, what I have shown you is 1/10 billion billionth of what could be shown in this matrix. In fact, each of you can make up such a matrix estimate for yourself. Take this matrix and put it somewhere plus, somewhere zero, somewhere minus, and immediately you will see according to your simple formula. Then count the sum of the pros, count the pros minus, count the sum of the cons, and you will see how you feel in general. If you have more advantages, then you are more or less happy. There are a lot more of them, then you are generally happy. And if you have fewer disadvantages, then you will naturally feel like an unhappy person. And there is one small feature here that is unpleasant for many people who are trying to hide from this world. The trick is that you can't hide from this world. You're not going anywhere from him. And if it's bad in the country, let's say, and you're bad in the city, but you personally feel very good, then you still won't be fully happy. You're going to make her think you're happy. At the same time, you will think, but this is such a bad country. But there is another country of my dreams. Switzerland of some kind, America and Thalia. I was just unlucky that I got into this bad country. But there, everything is fine there. I'll buy you a house for myself, and I'll live there. It will be good there. And so many people do. They really are. Well, nothing can be changed in Russia, so they buy real estate abroad, for example. Work there to have a piece of happiness. Now, after the 20th year, as if this dream of that happy world has been shaken by many, because some, having bought houses, now cannot even get to them. And if they get there, then they sit there. I know, curfews, for example, empty streets, cafes are closed. There is no one to communicate with. And that sitting in Italy in an empty house, that sitting somewhere near Moscow in an empty house, that sitting somewhere in Yakutia in an empty house becomes absolutely indifferent. That is, like this idea that you can find such an ideal place. And moreover, I know people who, let's say, lived in Russia, earning in Russia successfully, entrepreneurs. Then time passed, and they scolded Russia all the time. They didn't like Russia. Why? Well, there are some people who don't like the place where they live, right? Then once time passes, yes, and he rushes somewhere there. And then one time, he moved there, somewhere in some Switzerland, or somewhere else in some country. And 3, 4, 5 years after he got used to it, you suddenly find out that this person is just as scolding this unfortunate country where he settled. Why? Because it turns out he doesn't like it everywhere. He just didn't know it. He thought that this paradise, so to speak, an exhibition, so to speak, a Lubokny one, was somewhere there. And he's nowhere to be found, it turns out. That is, it's impossible to hide from the world, in fact. The question arises, what can I do for the world? Personally, for example, what am I doing? I'm pro for the world. Here I live in the city of Konakovo. I like the city of Konakovo. Yes, it is developing. Beautiful roads were built there recently. There was no such thing under the Soviet government at all. A gorgeous road from Leningradka to Konakovo, from Konakovo to Dubna. An ice palace was built. For example, a lot of shops are opening, entertainment centers, luxury auto repair shops are opening. In other words, the city is developing. We have a beautiful pine forest. I like the city, for example, right? In general, for example. But what can I do for the city? Here I am personally, a specific Sukhonov Sergei Ivanovich, who lives somewhere on the outskirts of this Konakov. But I can only smile, so to speak, at the sellers in the shops to raise the general mood of people in this city. And I go to the forest and regularly collect garbage there. I return with garbage bags from there. In other words, I am cleaning that small fragment of this city that I got by living. That's all I can do. But on the other hand, I write all sorts of books, including creating a new cosmological picture of the universe. I hope that I have made some contribution to the universal development of mankind. Well, at least Roman culture for sure. In other words, it's as if I live not only for myself, but also for the city a little bit, and for humanity a little bit. So that's what another person can do. I think that every person can decide what he can do for the whole world, for all mankind, for his city, for his country. And if a person does something and feels pleasure from it, then he will fill his matrix with these positive cells. And if he is on the contrary, let's say, littering, destroying, dirty, then he will fill it with black. Sooner or later, the whole wave will come back to him, I believe. That's how we would end up with you, but mostly about this matrix, although it's infinitely possible to talk about it here. And now we are starting the third part of our presentation, which is devoted to the problems of development in 3 layers: biological, social, and spiritual informational. The next slide. Development. The next slide. Limits of growth in biology. At the lower level, you can't improve your health all the time. Well, impossible. If you have a great one, then that's it. You have reached the limit. You have a gray cell, so to speak. You have appreciated it. You have stopped. Although I know myself, and I know some restless people like me, who are always looking for some better medicines, some better herbs, some medicines, some exercises. I do it all the time, I admit, of course. Yes, I want to improve all the time, but I am an improver. I need to improve my health. It's not normal, but I need to make it even better. Thank God, this is not happening to harm. I'm trying, at least. Next. The body, yes. But we can't pump the body indefinitely. Up to a certain age, you can, of course, improve your tennis skills there in table tennis or lawn tennis, or there in volleyball. Pump your muscles, go to the gym. But sooner or later, there comes an age when you can't do it anymore. So, there is also a dead end, restrictions. What can be done with our feelings? You can't eat 2 stomachs. There is a limit to the throughput of all 5 human senses. Some people who studied poorly at school and do not know this, they think that there is no limit to this. They begin to eat, drink, and consume all the benefits without any measure. Sooner or later, the body refuses this pleasure, satiety sets in. And as in that fable or fairy tale about halva, halva ceases to be sweet, alcohol no longer intoxicates, drugs no longer excite. It is necessary to increase the dose all the time, and a person destroys his own body. this consumer object. The consumer begins to die in it. And a lot of creative people, in this way, spurring their consumer quality, brought themselves to complete exhaustion and even death. In other words, it is a very dangerous way to go along the path of improving these five senses. The next slide. What limits are there in the social world? Here we are going to talk to you about the Weber-Fechner law, which was discovered in the 18th century by two scientists, Weber, then Fechner. It looks like this mathematically very difficult for non-mathematicians. In fact, I will translate it for you into ordinary everyday language. This means that all of our five senses are arranged in such a way that we perceive the world not additively, but multiplicatively, IDS logarithmically. What does this mean? I'll explain now. We feel only an increase, but the increase is not absolute, relative. Even more specifically, here you go into a room with a theme, turn on a 100-watt bulb, you have a light. There was absolute darkness, it became bright from 0 to the sun. Turn on the second light bulb, it becomes twice as bright in the room. Turn on the third light bulb, it becomes 1.5 times brighter. But if you have 100 light bulbs on, and you turn on the 101st light bulb, you won't see any difference. You won't feel the difference. You won't feel it. Don't feel it. Although before that you turned on one light bulb, and it doubled there, and then this light bulb was turned on. When 100 light bulbs are lit, why? Yes, because our sense organs, they are arranged, biophysicists have proved this, and tested it 100 times in 150 years, even more. Scientists know all this, but 99% of ordinary people do not know that we, all five of our senses, they are arranged logarithmically, proportionally. They perceive the world only in increments relative to what was. It was 100 watts, added 100 watts twice. There were 500 watts, added 100 watts by 20%. The same light bulb, but the result is different. I drank, let's say, 100 grams of vodka. It felt good. I drank another 100 grams of vodka. It became twice as good. Then there is a decrease in sensitivity. You can already drink as much as you want. I checked on beer, on cognac. The state of intoxication does not change, you know, up to a certain threshold. There, of course, there is a limit to this law, right? When everything breaks down and collapses. But in principle, as it were, there is. This is not only with vision, it is also with hearing the same picture. Those who make devices, here are some speakers, know that turning the knob, let's say, by 1 division, is not an increase there, let's say, by 10 watts there. This is a completely different pattern. It's the same with our tactile sensations, with taste, with hearing. That is, all five senses are arranged in this way. First of all, this law has been known for a long time. Known to scientists, once again, well, few people are known, unfortunately, from ordinary people. The next slide. Here. But the fact is that everything is so arranged in the social world that the Weber-Fechner law also applies there. Why? Now we'll figure it out. Not only with the sensual, but also in the social world. In the social world, what is our task with you? Collect as many social bonuses as possible. Which ones? Money, career location, more dating, more fame, more of that, more of everything. Everything that concerns the social world. Everyone strives one way or another, even Mother Teresa, a holy woman. She somehow gained bonuses of fame and gratitude. And, of course, she wanted more and more and more. Some singer, let's say, is also striving for fame there. There, however, fame is associated with money. We had a time in the Soviet Union when there was no such direct connection. There was fame, there was no money. There is now. There are. There is fame, and there is money, and there is no singer, but there are also such stories. But at least it's all connected in the social world. So, in the social world, as in any material world, because it is a material world, there are its own boundaries, its own limitations associated with the limitation of resources. They exist in the biological world and are repeated one by one in the social world. And many people don't understand this. Now we are going to look at it with you. Here is the so-called exponent. It says quantitative characteristics, population size, amount of information, human energy capacity, and everything else is growing exponentially. Yes, if we look at the history of mankind, it turns out that everything is growing exponentially. Both our population and everything else is growing exponentially. But since the resources of the earth are limited, and in general the resources of any ecosystem are limited, sooner or later, it is an exponent. It can no longer realize itself because there are not enough resources. And what happens to her? She starts to get out. And in the same 19th century, there was a German scientist who discovered the so-called logistic curve. So what's going on? It starts to bend, goes out on some kind of board, and everything is installed. Why? Because that's it. The resources have run out, and nothing can be done anymore. The next light. So here we come to a very interesting moment. Let's say I am, well, someone else, not me, a person who wants to become rich and enjoys being a businessman. Earns more and more and more. A normal state, because business in many cases is a positive thing for society. Someone creates shops, someone creates some, so to speak, factories, someone creates some other services. One way or another, a person tends to become richer and richer. And so a man in his youth set a goal to get rich. And he begins to get rich. He begins to get rich, but he does not know that the attitude to wealth is exactly the same as feelings, namely proportional. What does this mean? Let's say an increase in income per month of 30,000 times a year. Let's assume that some Mr. Tan, who lives in Moscow, earns 70,000 a month, for example. Well, such a good average salary for an employee, let's say, in Moscow. And then they added 30 to him, he began to earn 100. He comes home, puts a bottle of cognac, his wife, everyone is happy, the increase has gone. Then, it means that after a while, he added 30 more there, another 30 and so on. And now let's put another situation that, let's say, some bank owner is sitting all in the office. His deputies come to him and say, Ivan Ivanovich, our incomes have increased by 30,000 rubles a month. He will expel him. He will say, what are you doing? What did you come here to me with? I see, right. So what is the paradox? The fact that a person is not happy with the absolute value of the increase in his wealth. Absolutely not happy. He is pleased only with the relative magnitude of the increase in wealth. What does this lead to? To the fact that at the beginning, when he starts receiving 30% more every year from 70,000. Here is this formula, yes, 1 and 3x minus 1. This curve is built according to this formula. Here 5 years pass, here he has such earnings, in 10 years such, in 15 years. In order to receive the same pleasure that he received from 30,000, he already needs to receive an increase in income of 1 million. After a while, he needs to receive 120 million increase in income, and in 2 years, he will be pleased with an increase of only 1 billion. And then this curve goes to infinity. And since the resources of the country and the world are limited, depletion occurs. And then it comes out somewhere here, or here, or here. It doesn't matter where this curve is for all absolutely people who are chasing money. It comes out on a gentle slope. And then he has no growth. Here he has achieved his goal. He has reached some level of wealth. The environment does not let him go further. There are not enough resources. I see, right. I recognized such a person, Panikin Alexander Stepanovich. In the 90s, it was the largest amateur entrepreneur in our country. He was friends with families with Gorbachev, who came to visit him. Yes, almost everyone came. Zhirinovsky came to visit him. All the famous people came to visit him. He was so famous. And then he decided to create a party in the late 90s because he realized that he had reached a certain ceiling. Then he had no more growth. He got bored because a person gets high only from this increase. He went down this road. He needs an increase. There is no increase. For him, it's like a loss when there is no gain. Because it is. That is, if you stick to moving up this ladder, You have a feeling, an inner intuition, that you are falling, that it's bad, that you are standing still, that's it. And he began to search. He began to engage in political activity, philosophy, but unfortunately, he died early there. He died 51 years old. He went into politics with us, he would have found himself there. That is, absolutely any entrepreneur, anyone, even Bill Gates, has a ceiling. Elon Musk has one. They all have ceilings. And sooner or later, they begin to understand it. Here is the famous creator of Amazon, in my opinion, admitted that he was the happiest person when he was just starting his business. Why? Because then even $1 received a day was an extra joy to him. The creator of Harry Potter, a writer, she says, I was the happiest when I was poor, when no one took me my works. All publishing houses kicked me off, but I came to a little house next to the house, sat down at a coffee table, drank coffee and wrote my novels. She wrote, she created, she was happy. Then she wrote it all, bought a house with servants, with a swimming pool, with palm trees. And she walks there sad and dreary. Why? Because creativity is over, and money does not bring her pleasure. Personally, I know several people who have achieved just very great wealth, personally very great wealth, and are very unhappy. And so unhappy that it's just a chronic alcoholic, one of them. This is a person who just drinks vodka from a bottle and any kind of burnt vodka and all that stuff. Once a day of the week they come, they put him on a drip, they save him. Although a person has, well, all absolutely unimaginable riches. There he has one toilet, costs as much as an apartment in Moscow costs. And this does not give anything, it turns out. Why? Because he has reached this wealth, and then he begins to spend it. And when he spends it, he feels that something is wrong. You can't fool human nature. The next slide. Yes, there are only 3 ways out of such a resource impasse. The first one, a person goes to the plateau and calms down. There are people who know how to stop and say, that's enough, I'm going to take care of my grandchildren there, I'm going to travel there. Well, there are such people. The second option, a person starts twitching and collapses. He can no longer find further such a level of consumption and income for himself. Or he starts getting richer all the time, then getting poorer, then getting richer, then getting poorer. But there are some people who swung. Even Trump, they say, went bankrupt several times and took off, went bankrupt and took off. These are all curves that are not built on Trump. These are all curves from ecology, from biology. They repeat themselves one by one in the social world. All the same laws, absolutely. Study ecology, and you will understand how the social world works. And one in one. Then the life check of my conclusion, is this serious, right? Winning the lottery and finding the treasure is the way to misfortune. Why? Because the journalists found out that 90% of the people who won the lottery accidentally received money or found a treasure, then became unhappy. 90%. This is a serious percentage. Why? Because if you accidentally won a large sum and you had an income of, say, 30,000 a month, there's some kind of good pension, and you won 2 million, then you feel, in fact, incredibly rich while you think about it. You feel rich when you go to the bank. You feel rich when you go out of the bank with money. You feel rich. While I brought the money, I put it somewhere in the safe. I feel rich for one more night. The next day, your wife comes and starts telling you, you need to buy this. Relatives come, friends come, racketeers come. And from that moment on, you start to roll down. And since you have no natural income at all, then everything else, your life, turns into continuous misery. Many people end up in mental hospitals, get drunk after they accidentally get big winnings. These are statistics. Here are hundreds of examples from his life. I'm only about one, the next bark. There was such a story with Vivian Nicholson. She won £150,000 in the 63rd year. It was crazy money at the time. Lottery. When asked by journalists about what she plans to do with this crazy wealth, she replied that she intends to spend and spend. As a result, for 3 years she burned through this state, emptying the shelves of the most expensive London department store, buying expensive cars, visiting summer establishments, and generally living to the fullest. During this time, Vivian managed to get married 5 times in 3 years, get divorced, fall into the clutches of a green snake, undergo treatment for alcoholism, spend some time in a clinic for the mentally ill. Now she is a downtrodden pensioner who sits, generally afraid of everything in the world. Here is the result of a random win. It's that she stayed alive, thank God. A lot of people are dying. The next slide. And what about us? Why should we go to England? We have a fairy tale about a fisherman and a fish, which, so to speak. Remember that old woman, right? Everything was not enough for her. How did it end? A broken carriage. For some reason, no one takes this fairy tale seriously, but this formula is sewn into it. And again, do you remember Bender, who traveled with millions? Do you remember what he said? An idiot's dream came true. Yes. Bender said sadly when he had 2 million rubles. The next slide. So, if a person climbs up the career ladder, up the ladder of wealth all his life, then sooner or later he comes to a dead end. There's nowhere else to go. That's it. For many reasons. The forces ran out, the resources ran out, the enemies overcame. What to do? There are only 3 ways to solve this problem. The first one is a change of occupation. That is, to leave this road for another road and start all over again there. The second one. There was a Roman emperor who hired a man who traveled with him all the time. He was carried on a stretcher, and this man whispered in his ear all the time, "You are an ordinary person. You are an ordinary person. You are an ordinary person." And the crowd shouted, "Our God of the Holy Emperor is coming. You're an ordinary person." Why? Because power is absolute. It absolutely corrupts. And if you believe that you really are this one that the crowd is shouting about, and after a while, you want to go even higher, and there is nowhere to jump higher, that's where the horror and nightmare begins. Therefore, more than half of the emperors ended up badly. Well, the third option is the struggle to maintain a place on this peak. Because you are at this peak, and suddenly you see others creeping up. Well, there is something to do. It is necessary to shove them, push them away, throw stones at them, so to speak, so that they do not climb. And in such a drive, you can live the rest of your life. This is called the redistribution of property there, as you want, the redistribution of the world there, gang fights. It's all going badly nearby. The next slide. Now, if happiness is in wealth and power, well, I repeat again, there is no such happiness there. If you are a person who has been given the opportunity by fate to manage big money, and you manage this money, like Elon Musk, or let's say some other person, Steve Jobs, very skillfully, and create some big business, yes, then this is happiness. And it's just money by itself, and you don't know where to put it. You start spending it. But such an example was with the famous inventor of the Singer typewriter, when at first he was absolutely poor. It was the middle of the 18th century, I don't think I remember, or the 19th century, in my opinion. 19th century. You know the Singer's story. A man from the bottom invested the last money in a patent, invented a typewriter that no one needed at first. Then it went, and he became the richest man in the world. And he became in America, of course. And in America, the people, the shareholders of the company that he created, they begged him to get away, leave America. Not to show any more, because he discredited this company as much as he could with his behavior. Because he did not understand what to do with the money, used it, did absolute stupid things. In short, he was sent to Europe. He invested money in Europe, in some huge palace, a castle, which he entered by carriage, in a bedroom. In other words, we made a bedroom that could be entered by a carriage drawn by 4 horses. And he would enter the bedroom in this carriage, get out, flop on the bed. The carriage would turn around in his bedroom and leave. This is how he spent the unthinkable money that he earned them. He ended badly. Why? Because the constant drunkenness, drinking, this debauched lifestyle led to the fact that, in my opinion, he did not live to be 60 years old, Singer. Well, as they say, here are different people. Yes, they live differently. But with money, so I repeat again, if money is harmonious for you, that is, no amount of money can spoil, if it's money. You know what you're spending on? That is, each person has his own ceiling of the ability to process some amount of money. I know that from myself. I had a period when I had a lot more money I was earning than I do now, and I didn't know what to do with them, in fact. That is, I didn't use them very skillfully. And then I kind of artificially lowered myself to some level of balance of my capabilities, this money. And now I'm thriving at this level, I would say. Well, I like everything. Here. But as for the power, it would seem that this is absolute happiness. You climb higher, 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 higher. And what's on top? Let's see. There was nothing higher than the Roman Empire. In the Roman Empire, more than 60% of the emperors were killed in 500 years. Not a bad profession, Emperor of Rome, right? The risk of dying, and at a young age, was more than 50%. We have a little less in Russia, 30%. Well, just take Tsarevich Dmitry, Peter II, Peter III, Paul I, Alexander II, Nicholas II, and so on. 30%. It's also quite a risky profession. The dubious happiness of being an emperor, despite the fact that the most dangerous sport is mountaineering. Above 6,000 meters, the percentage of mortality is 10 to 12%, 3 times less than our emperors, and 6 times less than the Roman emperors, mind you. Where is the profession more dangerous? And the so-called base jumping is when a person jumps, opens his arms, and flies on these here. Bats, you know, right? From the mountain. A terrible sport, it would seem. There's only 1.5% mortality. These two sports are the most dangerous. They are the safest in relation to any, so to speak, power. I'm not talking about the gang fights of the 90s. Here, if you go to the town, look at the cemetery, there are a lot of beautiful monuments to very young guys who laid their heads in the 90s for no clear reason. Well, they probably read both of them. The next slide. So, happiness does not depend on the level of wealth and power. Alexander the Great conquered the whole world, but died 32 years ago. Diogenes sat in a barrel until he was 89 years old. The question is, which was better? Moreover, when the Macedonian came to Diogenes, he said to him, "Go and block the sun for me." The ambassador. He was nothing to him. Daughter of Anasis, one of the richest heiresses in the world at that time. She didn't live to be 40. Either from drugs or from alcohol, she died. It would seem, well, that a person has it all, right? Something was missing in life. Well, not to mention Whitney Houston, and so on, Michael Jackson, and other celebrities who, despite the fact that they were rich, and had fame, and had a lot of things, they could not cope with it. But this is like a separate case. They may say, well, just think, but what? There are no such people among the poor, right? Plenty. What are you bringing us rich people there, Suhonos? I spoke on one channel where all the poor gathered, who hate all the rich very much. I started telling them this theory. I was hit by such a barrage of criticism. Are you justifying the rich there? Do you actually? Do you have any idea how we live? We don't have enough for vodka and bread here, but you're there. Well, in short, I realized that I had brought my theory to the wrong audience, right? But let's look at the big picture. Here you are, please. Predisposition to an episode of major depression in the 11th year. These are blue countries, these are developed countries. But these are countries that are not developed, with low and middle income. Where is our depression higher? Developed countries, rich countries. Do you know that the most depressed country in the world is America? That in terms of the number of antidepressants that the average American drinks, they have overtaken the whole world 10 times. That almost all Americans are on antidepressants, go to psychotherapists, and they have big problems with this case. It would seem, what is there, right? There you go. There is something missing in life. Knowledge, probably. The next slide. So that's what we're going to talk about next. So, what are the ways out of this situation for a creative person? Again, for a creative one, the first way out is to switch from one breed of people to another. In other words, you have been striving for some kind of wealth all your life. You have been striving for some kind of power all your life. In the end, you have achieved something. You see that nothing can be done further. You become a Buddhist, relatively speaking. That is, you move from this category to this category. You enjoy life, grandchildren, so to speak, nature. The sun has risen, the village walks. Well, remember the last days of The Godfather from the famous movie, remember. He's got vineyards there, sunshine, he's sitting, enjoying life. He no longer has to fight anyone, kill anyone, or escape from anyone. Such a transition at the end of life completely saves a person from disaster. The next slide. The second option. Unfortunately, that first option, it is more for the elderly already, for those who have lived. And for the young, this is this. Bandit disassembly repetitions all the time. Or here's Bruegel's famous 16th century painting of big fish devouring small ones. When large companies begin to devour everything else. So what's going on? It's happening in our world right now. Why? Because the capitalist world, which was rapidly capturing market after market, the labor market, the markets of everyday life. These are Southeast Asia, Asia, China, Japan, everything. Capitalism moved with a wide step along the borders and reached the Pacific Ocean. There was nowhere else to move. Well, just everything. The limit has come. And then they ran out of the source of their income, growth. That's it. Then there is absolutely nothing for capitalism to do. Capitalism has conquered the whole world. And then remember this picture when it stands at the top and looks into the abyss. And what's next? Here, without capitalism, as the person who stands at the top looks at the abyss now. Why? They can't offer the world any more development. All development is over for them. Within their concept, within their paradigm, within their sum of technologies, development has ended. And Kazin already said 5 years ago that all industries have become unprofitable, with the exception of the space industry. Therefore, the mask became the richest person. Oddly enough, the space industry. It reaches 30% profitably, and all the others have become unprofitable. Where the money is not invested, a loss. Here, there, here, everything is a loss. Everything, there is nowhere to develop. How did they escape? They began to issue virtual money. They opened a tap with money, which flooded the whole world with money, but they did not use this money in the economy. They stayed in this virtual space. You can talk. Hello. Here I am watching with you on this. Oh well, there's someone else there, right? So look, so this is the second option. Unfortunately, right now the redistribution of the world is a reality. I think that the rulers of the world do not want the first option of such senile calm for themselves. Most likely, this story will come here. Most likely, and us. Why? Because if there is nothing to expand at the expense of, then it remains to expand only at the expense of their own loved ones. That is, to start taking everything away from each other. The one who is stronger will take away less sense. The one who is bigger will devour. These are all very famous things. Nothing new is happening here. This has always happened, and that's it. The next slide. The third option. This is an option for the elite, leaving for another sphere of life. Who remembers Father Sergius of the story of Leo Tolstoy when the nobleman became a monk? The author of the Ramayana in Almika was a robber, then he became. Therefore, the Pharisee Shul became the Apostle Paul, went into another world completely from the Pharisees. According to legend, Emperor Alexander I became the Tomsk elder Fyodor Kuzmich. The Roman emperor began to grow cabbage, and a lot of other examples. That is, for specific people, individual, the option of jumping from one road to another road is possible. And now we are going to talk about this other road at the end of the next person. We're just finishing up. Well, I'm not bad, yes. There is one area where there are no boundaries, where there are no limits. I've been leading you to this conclusion for a very long time, and carefully, one might say drearily, even though I knew that you knew everything about it. This is an area of creative and spiritual growth that has no boundaries. Why? For a very simple reason. Because the more our cognition, the greater its surface. And the more the surface of the known, the more it comes into contact with the unknown. The area of the known is growing, and the unknown is growing even more. It is an endless process of cognition. Therefore, the process of cognition, intellectual development, and creative development has no limits. Moreover, additive laws do not apply there. I'm not going to talk about it now. Logarithmic laws actually work there. Every new fact that you acquire, it does not report to you just a fact. It interacts with your previous knowledge and enhances it by orders of magnitude. Well, this is relatively speaking. And the last slide is a mystery. And the highest level. That's it. We've been here, we've already passed intelligence, and thoughts, and knowledge. And here we break into the infinity of the development of the spirit. Because our soul is eternal, it has an infinite life. And the development of our soul is endless. And if we develop our soul, we become the happiest people on earth. Regardless of their level of wealth, affluence, quality of food, quality of life, as evidenced by so many Lao Tzu hermits and so on, and so on, and so on, who sat there in some cells, who felt physically, maybe uncomfortable, but were absolutely spiritually happy people. I repeat once again, society consists of different people, in the end I want to say, with different goals, tasks, different types, and therefore, it is difficult to advise this path of creativity and spiritual development for everyone, although on the other hand, it is necessary. So, well, let's ask questions first. If